It's Rena. Good to see you again. Happy Saturday, which means it's a day for sharing. Let's see if I can get my guest now. Where did she go? There we go. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure my camera doesn't shake here. She's coming. There she is. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been so long since I've seen your face.
I know. Life is on fast forward sometimes, it feels like, hey?
Yes.
Hi.
We just finished school too, so kids are out. We start summer today.
Yes, I've been seeing a lot of Texas posts of pool parties, and I'm very jealous.
I mean, you're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you.
So everyone, this is my friend Alanna. We were introduced, I'm going to say last year, around the time I launched my book through mutual friends of ours. Also, a previous connection before we actually met each other was when we lost Ashton. This mutual friend of ours gifted me your book. And your book still sits on my nightstand right next to me, next to Ashton's belongings as well. So I'm so happy you agreed to come on to Saturday Shares and to share a little bit about your story. Again, it's up to you how much or how little you talk about. But if you want to just give a bit of background, like who you are, where you are in the world, and then just share your story of what you've been through. And then we'll kind of go as we go along.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on, and it's nice to connect again for sure. And
yes,
I always love an opportunity to talk about Marshall and to say his name and share his story and our story. So it feels special, and I appreciate it.
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks. This journey started almost 12 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah. And as you and many of the people that will see this at some point know, the pathway to building your family and the miracle of birth, and how, in the beginning for myself, there was this naive, vision of what I thought building a family was going to look like. And had always been that sort of like, touch type A-ish, like, do all the things, check all the boxes, do all the steps, show up how you want to be, go after the things you want in life. And so it was like, okay, go get your schooling and go get a job and go get the house and go get a car and all the things. And it was like, okay, I'm ready to have a family and like, let's do this. And our first pregnancy, I was so excited and just like ready to be a mom, right? The second you find out you're a mom.
And instant connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you start having all your hopes and dreams and imagining like, I almost see it as like a redefinition of self without you even being aware that you're doing that. Whether it's real or not, you're creating this new version of yourself in your mind and in your thoughts and your feelings.
Yeah.
And then we found out at around 12 weeks that there was no heartbeat. And that was my first like slam into a wall, if you will, or complete kind of bring you to your knees moment where that was not the journey I was expecting, right?
Well, and especially when you reach 12 weeks too, because I don't know if it's conditioning or programming, but I know for me, as soon as you hit the 12-week mark, you think you're safe. Everything's good.
Yeah.
So
until, and we've talked about this before, life has some different plans. So we were able to have a beautiful boy, Aiden, a couple years later, and found out we were pregnant with our second or third pregnancy, and gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And I was, nervous about how could you love somebody so much when you're a parent and you have this like little heart inside of you and it's so full of love, and then this other little heart grows and it's just the same, right? Full of love for another child. There's no competition, there's no overlap. It's just this beautiful process that occurs, which is amazing. And we had a few glorious days together. And then when we were going to leave the hospital. He was born in November. We live up in Canada. During the pandemic, we ditched the city. We lived in Calgary, Alberta, and we moved out to the country. And so at the time, in the hospital in Calgary, and there's a full winter blizzard out there. It's minus 30 degrees Celsius. And my husband comes in, has the car seat in the room, and they heard a bit of a murmur checking him out, and said, oh, it's nothing. It's so common, fast forward, and a murmur turned into us moving to the NICU and all these tests starting to run and finding out that his heart was like in heart failure almost. Which we had no idea about any of this. He looked perfect on the outside, and
I was going to say, were there any
sleeping? And the only thing, like looking back in hindsight, is his hands and feet were starting to get really blue.
Okay.
And they were like, "Oh, that's common for babies. Like, it just takes them a couple days to like work through it." Basically, everything that was, no red flags, essentially.
Okay.
And then we were sat down by a doctor that we had never met and called us into a private room and asked me to sit down. And he sat down across from us and said the words that no one ever wants to hear, that "I'm sorry, Mama, but your son is very sick and he's never coming home." And I was just like, saying it now, I've shared my story a million times, and I still, like, those words, just like I'm having waves of like electricity through my body. Because no one ever wants to hear those words about anyone or anything that they love.
No.
We ended up at the children's hospital where we live. He lived for 2 weeks and had a number of different procedures, different things done. His condition was called vein of Galen, which is fairly rare, but it's essentially a ball of yarn of blood vessels that forms in the brain. They don't know why. And it shunts all the blood away from the organs as they come outside into the world, and they're functioning and breathing on their own and eating and digesting and all the things that we do outside of the womb on our own now. This formation was keeping all the blood in it. So his organs were all starting to fail.
To shut down.
Yeah. And then in the procedures that they were doing to try to like block the feeder vessels and some of the other things, he ended up experiencing like a number of seizures and strokes, and ended up like with severe brain damage. And it was not the way I ever imagined my life or my family or experience for my child. So it changed who I am. It changed.
100%. So I know we've talked about this before, and some other families I've talked to before, the importance of making the doctor-patient connection is huge when going through infertility, suffering loss. So you just mentioned a doctor you didn't know came in to give you that news. Like, how did that come about? Like, what?
Because
we received that
so quickly. You know what? It's crazy. There's actually this wild connection to the story that might be like of interest to share, because you just can't make this stuff up, right?
Ooh, tell it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have shared this part with you or not. So this doctor, I will leave unnamed for now. He was very kind and lovely, but I felt so much anger, and like just driving by that hospital could be a trigger, and like you have no relationship. And I talk a lot about this with different medical organizations, where it's like this intimacy and loss with a complete stranger.
Yeah.
Whether you're going through infertility treatments, or you're going through a loss, or you're going through difficult decisions or hard news to take, it's with a stranger. And we aren't prepared to do those things with people we love, let alone people that we don't even know or have never met sometimes, right?
Right.
But with him, it was really hard. And then when we moved to the children's hospital, there became like this team around us, and we got to know them again from nothing. You have to build that immediate trust with like simple little things that make a huge difference, right? I know we've talked about some of these, but like eye contact. I know you're busy, but like if you can deliver me information sitting at eye level for 2 minutes instead of talking to me like I'm a robot or won't understand. Subtle differences that I was able to share with a nurse recently that I bumped into, saying, you know, in the middle of the night, I'm pumping, we're in the PICU and I haven't slept in days. And I've got this milk that needs to go to the fridge and I'm so out of it. Like, I don't know where the kitchen is. I don't know where. And I asked, where do I put this? Instead of her pointing and being like, go down the hall, turn right, turn left, double doors, push the button, da, 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 da.
Yeah.
She says, let me take you, and puts her hand on my wrist and walks me there back. You know?
That it's
a 5-minute thing, but like I have told that story so many times now. I don't know if she'll ever know the impact that kind of care left with us, right?
I think that's what's care like that though is what's most important. And I think when there isn't a relationship like that, that's where it can get kind of muddled. Yeah. I've told you before when we switched to a different doctor and that doctor, all she did was put her hand on my hand and said, I'm sorry you're going through this.
Yeah.
It's the compassion and the empathy. And I think it helps us grieving moms know that we really are supported. And it's just the smallest thing. I'm so glad you had that in that moment.
Yeah. The doctor that I never saw again, that I literally spent, 8 or 9 years feeling like this awkwardness about.
Yeah.
I had gone back to visit some family that lives in Regina, Saskatchewan. I was born there. I have a lot of family there. And I was going back and I was going to be meeting with the unit manager and a couple people at their NICU and PICU. Mm-hmm. And so I'd written Carrie with me and we can, chat about that later. But yeah. I was bringing the book to talk to them and how, what their support bereavement program looks like and all that kind of stuff. And we were supposed to go for a coffee. The gentleman I was meeting said, you know what, like I don't have a ton of time right now. Something's come up. Let's just meet here. And he like opens this door and it's like this tiny little office closet full of stuff space, right? There's like a little meeting table at it and then like finally all this stuff. And he's like, is it okay? Like, can we just meet in here? And I'm like, yeah, sure. It's great. So we sit down at the table and we start talking. This is now Regina, not Calgary.
Okay.
And we start talking and, about their program and whatnot, and opens the door, looks in. We make eye contact.
No.
We both go like completely flush and just freeze. And he backs out the door and closes the door. And it's taking our brains a second to figure out what is going on. It is the doctor that told us the news.
You?
Yes. He has now since moved, was leading the department there in a new city, and happens to go into this random room at the same time I am there talking about our experience. And so I just said, I'm freaking out. I'm like, who is that? Who is that guy? Who? And they're like, Dr. So-and-so. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that's the doctor that gave us the news that our son was going to die. And they're like, do you want me to go get him? And I'm like, no.
Okay.
And then he's like, are you going to be okay? Do you need some water or something? Because clearly I was like
rattled.
Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And then I'm like, actually, yeah, can you go get him, please?
Did you talk to him?
Yes.
Oh my God, is it okay?
As he goes out the door to find him, he is walking back because he goes out and is like trying to piece it all together. He runs into a cousin of mine who works on that unit and starts explaining, and she's like, that's my cousin. That's the one that, and so he comes back and he just walked in and I walked up to him and we just hugged. And he just held me in his arms and we just hugged. And he's like, the second I saw you, I knew there was some connection and I couldn't figure out what. And then I walked away and I started to remember. And I came back And he's like, I've been, reading your blog and looking at stuff. And he's like, I'm just so proud of you to turn that pain into something so beautiful. And it was this crazy moment that was such a gift in life. How many people get an experience like that where I just got to make this peace and like forgiveness and grace, and not that he even did anything. It had nothing to do with him. He was just that deliverer of news that no one wants to hear, right?
Yeah.
And what a beautiful moment. So thank you for letting me share that, because a lot of people have never heard that story. So it's a pretty powerful one.
I don't know if you can see, but like I have shivers up and down both my arms, because I'm starting to think of the doctor that gave me our news. And I don't think, our situation was very different. You had Marshall for 2 weeks. Ashton, was stillborn. So I'm so happy for you that you were able to have that closure with him.
Yeah.
And since having Ashton, again, going back on what you were talking about, when you're pregnant, when you're having kids, you really see things differently and your mind shifts. And for me, I've noticed a lot of things happen for a reason. And again, I've told you so many times, I'm not an overly spiritual person, but I'm starting to think there is definitely something more around us.
Mm-hmm.
And I firmly believe that you two in that moment were meant to see each other, to just give yourself that closure that you needed.
Absolutely. And I do believe in that kind of energetic universal power, whatever you call it, 100%. And that was a pull that was there, and you can't make that stuff up, right? Like you just can't.
No, you can't make it up. When it's supposed to happen, it's supposed to happen. So honestly, he obviously was probably thinking about you guys too a lot.
Well, and I think it was a light touch. I don't want to, pretend like he remembered everything about us, because we just saw him that day, and the next day we were transferred to another hospital. So he didn't know us for long. He didn't know our son, all of those things that you wish happened, but don't have the luxury of. But the cool thing is then he kind of got to learn like more about it after the fact too, right?
Right.
Which was kind of a neat experience. And one of the things that we were talking about in the beginning that, might be supportive for some people to hear was, after going through losing Marshall, it was like, we talked about getting to the 12-week marker.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these checkpoints that we create, these false things. And we just do that as humans in general, right? Like I'm, talking with girlfriends and things, and it's like, we actually, no matter what job you're in, no matter what home you're in, no matter blah, 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 nothing is guaranteed. We all walk around like everything's guaranteed and staying status quo forever, but life doesn't go like that, even though we just build believing that.
Right.
But that's actually the power that gets me out of those traps, is that after having lost Marshall, it was like there was no safety date in pregnancy for me. And I think a lot of people go that route in their mind, right? In their hearts, after losing a son or a daughter stillborn or whatever stage it is. It's like you made it through the markers, and it still can happen.
Still happened.
Our families that we support through SIDS and SUDC and all the things beyond. And I would get in my head, we had a daughter, Lily, after Marshall passed away, beautiful girl that they're growing up really fast now. They're all preteen, sassy, wonderful humans going out on their own. But it was like, I was terrified the whole way through, and more terrified when she was born, that she was going to die at some point. And, it's like you get a sleeping baby and you see them sleeping, but then they look like their brother who's dead. And it's like, oh my God, like, is she alive? You're waking her and going through these things. And you still feel like that. It's different for everyone, of course, like every process. But it was like, once grief found me, I was terrified it could find me again. And
wow.
The only thing that I found that helps me through those backing myself out of the corner is that connecting in the present moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And taking like the quick brain refresh of, okay, where am I? What room am I in? Like, what am I sitting on? What am I wearing? Like simple things like that. Or, you know, a breath of fresh air, open a window in a car, take a step outside, take a deep breath wherever you're at. But then the thought process of like the bigger picture, and going back to what I just shared of there are no guarantees. So I can't prepare myself. I can't take any, you know, extra steps to make sure that like there has to be this element of trust and acceptance in life where you live and remind yourself that that's the same for everyone, not just our children, right?
Right. Wow, you touched on a lot of deep stuff there, Alanna. I'm like, I have so many thoughts in my head right now trying to get them out. But when you suffer a trauma like that, and I think this is the first time we've actually sat down and you've been this in depth with Marshall. I think we talked more about Ashton in the past just because of where we both were. So I think it makes total sense to me that when you had Lily, you were like, I have her, but she looks just like Marshall, and where am I at? Because it brings you back to the trauma. And I know when I got pregnant with Arissa after having Ashton, I'm like, okay, I'll make it to the 12-week mark and then I'll tell people I'm pregnant. Well, that week came and I couldn't tell anyone. Okay, I have to make it past 18 weeks because that's where I had Ashton and then I'll be fine. That came and went. You only knew if I was pregnant if you were with me physically. I never announced it on Facebook. Our announcement was a birth announcement. And so many people were like, I didn't even know you were pregnant. But I think what you were saying, after going through a trauma, there's no right way to do things. You just have to do what feels right. And I mean, Uche was fine telling people I was pregnant, but I was like, I can't, because I just couldn't. I think I was secretly protecting us for another loss just in case. And I'm like, I don't think I'll be okay until I have this baby in my hand. Yeah. Whereas for you, I made it to baby in my hand, but you also know the other side of it. So, wow. How did you, okay, so how old was Aiden when you had Marshall?
15 months.
Oh, he was a little itty bitty.
Yeah.
Okay. So how were you able to navigate losing Marshall while also having a 15-month-old?
As I could.
Okay.
You know, you just do because you have to. You don't have a choice, right? Mm-hmm. And he was a blessing in the sense that it gave me a reason to get up in the morning. You know, I couldn't stay in bed all day and grieve and just kind of like winter in. We had family and friends supporting us through that, so we weren't alone, and I know that's not the case for everyone. Mm-hmm. But we did lean on our family and friends for emotional support, for just help. You know, like we had, you know, amazing angels dropping off food and those sorts of things, right? Because you're just I was in this fog for a long time. Yeah. And then there's this weird dichotomy of like everything that he did brought me joy to watch his face. And then I would just be like bawling watching it as well, because I knew I was looking at him through the eyes of like, in my mind, Marshall will never get to do this. That's so unfair. Like, why? Mm-hmm. You know, it was winter, like I said, so we would take a note on the sled or tobogganing or something, and I would watch him giggling and I would be so smiling, and then it would just turn into this like visceral heartbreak, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like when is this?
What is this? Yeah, I connect so much with what you said, because when we lost Ashton, we had Anson, who was 2.5 at the time, and I've said the same thing. He's the one that got me through it because I had to. So mm-hmm. for mamas and dads and couples who don't have an older child and who have gone through loss, what is the biggest takeaway or piece of advice we can give them? Like you talked about friends. I'm going to segue into, you have created an incredible bereavement program is what I'm trying to say. Um, for those who don't have maybe family support and friends like you had and like I had, or don't have an older child who really does force you to keep on keeping on because you have no choice. Um, is that why, or was that what helped you create Carry You With Me? And also segue into Carry You With Me and give us a little bit of information about that.
Yes, absolutely. Other things, I've had recent conversations with fellow bereaved parents about this. One that they've shared is pets played a huge role in their support system that they had, getting them through that. And
Okay.
then permission to grieve, right? Like being very expertly told, or, you know, in these dialogues with their professional supports, whether that was a counselor or psychologist, saying like, you're doing exactly what you need to do. If you're watching reruns and Netflix and laying in bed and sleeping and, you know, getting out for a walk here and there, good job. You're doing the work.
You've done it. Yeah.
That was so empowering, right, for people, that it wasn't, you know, there isn't this like get back to it and, you know, mentality. Carry You With Me kind of started off organically, and I think one thing I've witnessed in just about every bereaved parent I've met along the way is you want to give back and you want to help, and that looks different for everyone 100%, but it's like there's comfort in knowing you're not alone, right? And as we meet people on this path, the exchange of the support they can offer us and the acknowledgement, kind of that key witness role, but also then offering that back in the reverse, being able to sit with somebody and talk about death, to be able to talk about their child and how beautiful they were, and look at the pictures that are hard for other people to see, or hear the things that are hard. Our family and friends love us. They can't always hear about those moments when our child took their last breath, or some of the pain and the trauma we've been through. It hurts them to see us hurting. They don't have the language or the preparedness, if you will, to sit in those spaces sometimes. Whereas I find other bereaved parents have walked that path, and so they have some ability to walk with you on those journeys. It started organically in that I joked I wanted to be the official hugger of people and just like beam into rooms and hold people. And
Yes.
and people, you know, I was very open about our experience and story, and people would come up and share in my office or ask to go for a coffee and share that they had lost a son stillborn, you know, 20 years earlier, or friends, family, everyone around me, you know, within 1 degree of separation knew somebody who was going through loss or who had been through loss. And so I had written the storybook about a year after Marshall passed away. And it took me 6 years to get to a place in life and my heart and courage and all the rest of it to bring it to the world. And so the second I said out loud I was doing the book, I knew I wanted so much more, and I wanted a way to connect with people more directly. So I created the Carry With Me online community. And then the program was this beautiful evolution. For me, it was like I was connecting with people, I was speaking at things, and, you know, working out in the community. But every time somebody new joined, or every time I got to meet somebody, it was like I wanted to share 100,000 stories, and I wanted to ask them 100 things. And I wanted to, you know, there was so much there that I wish somebody was able to say to me when I was fresh and when I was going through it, or even years later, to say like, it's okay that 2 to 3 years out, it hits you like in a whole different way. And it's okay to know that you're rebuilding your self-identity. You can't go back to who you were because you're rebuilding all. Mm-hmm. And so I spent about 14 months and worked with some different professionals in the field, worked with some different design folks, and helped create this program that was online and that was self-service in a way. So there's lots of things out there. This is another support in your toolkit. This is not the only thing for people. But I wanted something that I never found, something that was available 24/7. So if the house is quiet and it's midnight and I'm hitting a low point and I just want to like dig in on something about triggers or emotional pain or loss of joy, and understand, you know, a little validation that it happens to other people, And then 2, if I can hear some maybe strategies or tips or offerings that might help support me through it, or things that could help me feel joy again, could help me steps to incorporate that back into my life, to build an inspiration toolkit when I'm ready and on the days I feel good. So this program is not just for the low moments. That's often when people turn to it, and it's there online. You go when you like. So there's 7 modules, over 2.5 hours of short video content. It's built like 2, 3, 10-minute clips that comes with extra sheets or exercises and worksheets that you can either just think through in your mind, or you can write down and reflect. I have some couples that have shared, the wife bought it and then she was working through it, and then her partner saw her watching the videos and was like, what was that? And they started doing it as like a date night to parent their daughter that's passed.
Oh.
And just some really beautiful things. And so there isn't a right time for grief work. That's the one big thing I would share.
I think that, so to touch on that, as you're saying all of this, so for everyone, again, Alanna and I met last year, and you brought me into your program. And I have to be honest right now to myself and to you and to the world, I haven't told you this, I haven't fully done the program. And here's why. When you're talking about grief, when I was going through it, I don't think I knew I was experiencing grief as I was going through it. So to have a community and to have someone tell me this is what you're going through and it's okay would have been amazing. I'm worried, or not in a place yet, that if I go through the program, it's going to bring up a bunch of stuff that I'm not ready to handle right now, which is why I see all your posts. I read all your Instagram posts. I see your meditations. I have great intention and it will happen. But I just want the world to know, like, Ashton passed away in 2015. Here is an incredible program that Alanna has developed, and it's totally on your time, and do it when it feels right. I've had this in my pocket for a year and still haven't been able to, I don't know, dive in. So what advice could you give me?
Yeah.
And advice could you give others who, like I said, your book, do you have a copy of your book handy by you, by the way?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Just so we can show it. So our mutual friend, I'm just going to drop her name, Alanna. What's up, Alanna? The book, Carry You With Me. So Alanna gifted me that, and then you told me about your program, and you really have inspired me. You have held me. I don't think you realize how much impact you've had on me, and you truly have. I appreciate everything that you're doing. And like I said, that book of yours is still on my nightstand.
That's so
I just, for someone in my position, and I don't have an answer why I haven't gone through the whole program, because I probably should, because I talk about your program a lot. What do you have advice for me and other people who are struggling with doing the work, maybe? I don't know.
I think this is like the most beautiful conversation, and I think this is probably the number one feedback I get from people out there. It's really scary to think about. Again, it's a thought about what this is going to look like and what this is going to be, versus the reality and experience of what this is going to actually be, right? And so what I've seen and what I've experienced myself, I need to use it myself sometimes. Like, I was so scared the other week leading up to one of the retreats I was going to, and reading all of these most beautiful stories of loss, and knowing I was going to be spending time with these incredible mamas. But like, I was so caught up in that grief and that fear of like losing Aiden and Lily, seeing these older children dying, and I needed to go back and watch triggers, and like, I'm like, you need to work yourself right now, right? But it was, and it did help. But I also needed to give myself that 24 hours in that space and just be in the thing I was in. I could acknowledge what was happening, And I knew I was going to take steps out, but I just wanted to be in that space for a bit. And for people going through it, I think the biggest thing I would say is that it was built so that there is flow through an evolution of life and of processing. But there's no direct path. So every single video, every single module is standalone. And so that it is built in a way that you might want to watch a simple component, and there's a huge chunk. One of the biggest chunks ended up being on relationships and communication and conflict. Not surprising, right?
Not surprised at all.
But that's such power, and that was one of the other big drivers for creating it. Was I constantly experienced and witnessed so much secondary loss, and people losing relationships with their parents, with their spouses, with their colleagues, with, I could go on and on, self-identity, faith, you name it. And I thought, that's bullshit. Like, we've been through a lot, and we shouldn't have to lose the other half of our life along the way as casualties of evolving through loss. And so that's why a lot of these things were built, and to say, like, okay, I just had like a really awkward situation, or like I'm carrying a heavy burden with my best friend who, I thought was going to be there or wasn't, or my mother, or whatever it is. And you can go click on that 5-minute video with those, specific relationships, and just have a little like intentional moment to work through a thought process on that. So the program was not meant to, or designed to, in a way to take people, walk them into a pit of pain, crack you open, and then say, like, get comfortable in your pit of pain. It's actually the complete opposite of saying whatever you're feeling now is a legit feeling that you're having. But like, here's a few perspectives and insights and tools that might support you along the way in that moment. And so it's not about sitting down and doing the whole program. I think there's been 1 or 2 people that have ever done that. I think everybody that I've talked to so far who's, participated, it's like, oh, I watched these 5 videos and I really like them, and that's all I want to touch this year. Or like, I watched this module last year, and then this year I hadn't come back into it for a year, but now I'm looking at this and I was like, why didn't I look at this before? Like, there's a whole module on this. And you won't be surprised to find that a lot of the sort of strategies or, exercises, they can actually apply to multiple areas in your life, not just loss. Just loss. That it was like, I don't have to be in a cycle of grieving to get value from this. Grief becomes woven into the fabric of who I am. So it touches on life, not necessarily focused on grief.
Yeah. I'm so glad you explained that, because I think you tried, well, and I've never been honest with, like, I just haven't told you, because honestly, I felt stupid. I'm like, here I have this friend with an amazing program, but yet for some reason I can't do it, and I don't know why. But I think what you just said is, I think in my head I had this vision that it's just going to take me to this pit of despair and hold me there, and I've already been there, and I don't want to go there.
No. And it's not, and it really isn't. And, if anyone starts to walk into that experience, I'm always available to continue that conversation and help get you, the resources that are needed. This isn't a, psychological, complicated grief 5-step program into something else, right?
Right.
This is an opportunity to explore what you've been through and really empower you to navigate your life going forward.
Which is the $1 million, how do you navigate after grief? And I think you're doing an amazing job. I love that with your program, you focus on the whole. Like I said, you do meditations, you do yoga, you have a whole bunch on this program platform. I'm going to wrap it up because our 30 minutes, we're at 40 right now. In the comments, can you put a link to your program just so everyone can take a look? If you just want to pop it in there, and then I will also post it when I post the live video. Just so for who need, again, it's another source to help you through difficult times. Alanna has done a wonderful job of, you're super approachable and sweet, and it really exudes itself in your program. Everything is very kind and soft. And as Alanna mentioned, if you have any questions or want to dive deeper into it, she definitely is available. And I know we haven't known each other very long, but like I said, you really did last year help me in a very, I'll say, deeper time of my life. I think last year or 2 years ago when I wrote the book, my book, I think was the first time I processed my grief properly, and you really helped me through that and helped me through that in the kindest way. So I'm so thankful you were comfortable coming on here and sharing your story about Marshall.
Made way and
Pardon?
Your book is amazing, by the way, and I have heard it to a couple people again recently. But one of the things I really appreciated was obviously I love storytelling, and you are an excellent storyteller.
Thank
I
you.
like hearing about like how you and Uche met and all those things. That just adds such flavor for life, because we are not just our loss. It is part of us, not everything.
Fine, just by this loss.
Your humor was just so wonderfully woven through, which I think, you know, people often are shocked to find lost parents like really laughing, but we get this dark, awesome humor sometimes. It's great to have a book. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, pat on both of our backs. I think we're doing good. And just keep up your work, and we'll stay connected. And when I come to Calgary this summer, hopefully we'll get to connect with each other. But I really appreciate your time. And everyone, if you know someone who has just suffered loss, or who is going through it, or not even just suffered, who has had it years ago, and is just looking for that extra direction, take a look at Carry You With Me. Alanna has developed a great program. And I'm telling you this, and in my head, I'm going to look at it deeper too. I make you that promise to the world. Hold me accountable. And just know that you're not alone. All of us bereaved parents are here together, and we're here to support you and lift you up.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, hon.